I need you to stay upstairs. I'm about to record. Go back upstairs. All right. Hey guys, I am trying to see if I can knock this video out in 20 minutes. So I know this quarter I assigned 4 FRQs, and some of us need to make up those FRQs. So if you're one of those students, or if you just want to make up one of your FRQs due to the fact that you failed it because you didn't study and you didn't come prepared to class, this is the video that's going to give you the tools needed to submit those FRQs by Monday. One is an argumentative essay. The other is a compare and contrast essay focusing on 2 Supreme Court cases. So in order for me to even look at your responses, I need proof that you have viewed this video through your Edpuzzle account. So I'm 1 minute in. Let's get started. I want to make this relevant, but I also want to tie it back to AP Gov objectives and principles and things that you guys will see on the AP exam. So I want to spend some time discussing the coronavirus and the Constitution, because the coronavirus is the reason why I'm home. No haircut, no makeup. And the coronavirus is also the reason why you're home playing video games. All right. So I listened to this great podcast and it was very informative. And I was like, I should assign it. But then I was like, this could be pretty boring for you. So I had to endure listening to it at home with kids. And I jotted down like the most important details that I think you guys need to know in order to complete those assignments. So first thing I want to talk about is the history of regulating public health. This country has always attempted to keep us healthy, keep us safe. And it predates to us living under the control of Great Britain, to one of the Articles of Confederation, to our current Constitution today. So regulating public health honestly has always been something controlled by state and local governments, which explains why you're noticing your mayor, your governor, your commissioners are constantly on the news issuing executive orders. And by now, you should know what an executive order is. It's when a leader is issuing a directive and it does not require anyone else to approve it. In this case, it does not require, let's say, the Board of Councilmen in a local city government to approve it. So let's move on. Regulating public health, quarantining individuals, forcing individuals to take vaccinations. That's always been something regulated by state and local government. All right. In some cases, if you did not follow the quarantine rules, you were put in jail, and sometimes you were put to death. That's what I learned today. And it was necessary even back then due to the fact that everyone was traveling. And with us having open ports and with us trading with other countries, who knows what's coming in and out. So there have been instances in our history when we have had to quarantine and really get a hold on a number of different illnesses and diseases, like the yellow fever, SARS, which is like the most recent one prior to the coronavirus. I believe it's more efficient to have local authorities handle it because they know their citizens, their constituents, and one rule doesn't apply to all, as you could see with situations with the state of New York, California, and even here in South Florida. All right. So the question becomes, where in the Constitution does it allow state and local governments to have this power to regulate or quarantine or, like to police us, to say, hey, stay home? And it's the 10th Amendment. You guys are already familiar with the 10th Amendment. The 10th Amendment basically grants powers that are not delegated to the federal government to state governments. And it allows them to create and enforce laws that will protect the welfare, the safety, and health of their citizens. And it looks like that's what they're doing, guys. So far, no rules have been broken. So when they're setting curfews, when they're asking everyone to stay home, when they're also shutting down businesses, This all falls under the 10th Amendment, which allows state and local governments to pretty much do that. All right. Now, have there ever been any challenges towards state governments in their power to police in regards to public health? And there has been. There has been not too many cases, but enough to discuss and grasp a better understanding of it. So one particular case that I learned today, look at that, I'm passing shit out to y'all. All right, is the Jacobson versus Massachusetts Supreme Court case in the year 1905. Notice I'm looking because I'm looking at my notes. And this court case centered around the state allowing cities to fine citizens that refuse to take the vaccination against the smallpox. Of course, a citizen challenged that law because they were fined $5 for refusing to take that vaccine. And the courts upheld the Massachusetts law. They said, hey, this law protects the well-being of society. And to really sum it up, this country has had a history of placing limits on the individual to benefit the greater good of everyone. So there's a lot of controversy centered around getting vaccinated and whether or not your child should or should not be vaccinated. And there have been studies suggesting that there are dangers in that, but the government is willing to some degree, put one person in danger in order to keep everyone else safe, if that makes sense. So I hate to say this, but so what if one person gets paralyzed from a vaccine? If that means 10,000 people are safer, then that's just a charge that the government is willing to take. All right, so that's one case, Jacobson versus the state of Massachusetts in 1905. There was actually a case prior to that case. Now, don't be trying to judge me because I know y'all be talking about me. But the case is called the Compagnie Française de Navigation. This is a company, and they filed a lawsuit against the state of Louisiana, which kind of explains why the company has a French name. Duh. All right, this case was decided in 1902. And this case basically gave states the authority to involuntarily quarantine individuals suffering from communicable diseases. In other words, airborne diseases, diseases that we could transfer from one person to the other. And the key word here is involuntary quarantine. And that's just proof that state governments can ask, and in some cases demand, that we quarantine ourselves during pandemics like the coronavirus. All right. So you have the 10th Amendment. You have these two court cases that could help your argument in terms of, whether or not the states should have the power to regulate this pandemic called the coronavirus. I'm trying to be funny here. All right, what's next? I'm 8 minutes in. Let's talk about the federal government's role. All right. So we know the states have the power. They've always had the power. In fact, they've had it, that power much longer than the federal government has participated or even engaged in public health situations. So let's talk about the federal government's role. The federal government's role is to support state and local governments. Key word here is support. So it's not the duty or the responsibility of Donald Trump, President Donald Trump, or the federal government to handle this pandemic. Historically, we have allowed state and local governments to handle it because they are in some ways more effective at handling it. But guess what? We live in a different time. We live in a different era. Country is big as shit. So, people are expecting the federal government to do something, all right? So what has our federal government done? Historically, they actually passed what we call the First National Quarantine Act in 1878, I believe. But the year doesn't matter. It was a long time ago, okay? And this allowed the federal government to, regulate and help the state governments when quarantine is necessary during situations like the coronavirus. So that's one example. Fact check me if you need to. I'm going to fact check myself. Hold on. All right, so this was initially passed in 1799, but there are actually other quarantine laws that have passed since then. Just know that there's a law that allows them to assist state and local governments in situations like this. In 1967, the United States federal government created the CDC, which also deals with quarantining and, pandemics and situations like the coronavirus. So the federal government does play a role, but I think the state and local governments are like the leaders in this situation, and the federal government is kind of like, okay, we're here to support, we're following you, and if you need us, just holla. All right. Now, when the CDC was created, we actually had 55 quarantine centers. But now, no. Let me back this up. We had 55. Then we decreased that number to 8 because by then we figured, like in the 1970s, 80s, we figured that, you know what, we're never going to have this problem again. And then booyah, SARS came and we increased the amount of quarantine centers to 20. So we only have 20 quarantine centers as of today. We only use it when it's absolutely necessary. So I'm pretty sure we're using it now. All right. So next question. What powers does the Constitution give the federal government when it comes to situations like this? Like, we know the state and local governments have historically had this power, but if the federal government wanted to step it up, step it up, where could they find the authority to do it? Well, a ton of ways to do it. Number one, they can create laws. Number two, the president can enforce those laws or use the CDC to push his agenda to attack this pandemic. He can also issue executive orders. Okay, and that's like the buzzword now, executive orders. All right. And as you can see, some state and local governments have that exact power as well. Specifically here in South Florida, they can use the Commerce Clause. The fact that they have the right to regulate interstate and foreign trade allows them to control this pandemic. That's why they have closed the borders. That's why they're not allowing people to travel internationally or to enter the United States if they're not a U.S. citizen. Okay, so they are using their powers to control this pandemic. If they wanted to shut down all the airports, they could, because that involves interstate trade. So anything dealing with interstate trade or foreign trade, the government could definitely use their Commerce Clause and those powers to control this pandemic. You also have the Necessary and Proper Clause, which is a very loose clause that allows them to, make up shit as they go. You know about that. That goes all the way back to McCullough versus Maryland. No need to go over that. You already know it. And they also have the Supremacy Clause, which allows them to kind of like overstep the powers of the state if needed. But honestly, I think the states are doing a pretty good job. It can be a little confusing because, one state's doing one thing, other states are taking on a different approach. But I think those different approaches they're good because they know what works for them. What's working in California may not work in Florida. What's working in Florida, and Florida don't listen. Why y'all still going out? But like I said, I got 5 minutes left. was working in New York may not work here in Florida, and vice versa. You get it? So it's great to know that we have a federal system of government that allows both levels of government to develop solutions to address this pandemic. All right. We can debate all day on which level of government is best fit to attack this pandemic, and that's probably going to be your FRQ. So check Canvas. Don't check it now. I'm still talking. So let's discuss civil liberties in regards to public health and trying to get us out of the situation called the coronavirus. Yeah. All right, so can your civil liberties be limited? I think they can. We have a history of limiting civil liberties during wartime. 9/11, World War I, World War II. You have court cases, Schneck versus the United States. I mean, the list goes on and on, but most of those examples are in regards to limiting civil liberties during wartime. This is a little different. This is not a war, but it's definitely a problem. And I don't know how far the government can go in terms of limiting our liberties. And to be honest with you, I don't think they've violated any of our liberties yet. But let's take a look at, some court cases that could give us better insight on dealing with pandemics and airborne diseases, and then our rights, like what's going to happen. I learned this today. There was actually a court case dealing with the Chinese Consolidated Benevolent Association. This was an association of 6 Chinese companies, and they decided to sue the San Francisco Board of Health. And the reason why they decided to sue the San Francisco Board of Health is because during the early 1900s, there was a bubonic plague that hit the Chinese quarter of San Francisco. So the city of San Francisco decided to issue a quarantine against this 15-block neighborhood. It just so happens that the neighborhood they were quarantining were of Asian descent. Go figure. If you think about the time, 1900, late 1800s, immigration restrictions like the Chinese Exclusion Act, xenophobia, nativism, where we're thinking that we're better than everyone else. I mean, you mix all of that up with a plague. What do we have a tendency to do? Blame it on the foreigners. So authorities immediately quarantined this neighborhood. They did not allow Chinese residents to leave that neighborhood. So, I mean, just think about it. If you had a job outside of that neighborhood, you couldn't go to work. They forced them to shut down all of their businesses. And the only businesses that remained open in that neighborhood were businesses owned by individuals that were not of Asian descent. So it appeared as if they were quarantining a specific group, which is why this group filed a lawsuit. The court ruled in favor of this group, stating that, hey, this quarantine was done in a way that promoted racism and segregation. And if you're going to quarantine one group, you need to quarantine everybody. And as you can see, we've been quarantining everybody. All right. So later on that year in 1900, the court did rule that the quarantine was racist, and they lifted the quarantine. All right. So this is a great example because we got to be careful. We know, well, let me not say we know. The media has told us that this virus initially started in China, and our president has quoted this as being the Chinese virus or the Kung Fu virus. I don't know, but those type of comments and that type of media, that sensationalized media, in history we call it yellow journalism, can be dangerous. It may lead state and local governments to quarantine certain groups and not all. And that, in my opinion, becomes a violation of civil liberties when you're just targeting one group. And of course, the Constitution protects groups, protects people. Which amendment? 14th Amendment, Equal Protection Clause. All right. Another example, in the 1940s during World War II, great example was FDR. President FDR issued an executive order that forced the relocation of Japanese Americans into what they like to call relocation centers. They're called concentration camps. Yeah. And Mr. Korematsu, he fought that executive order and it went all the way to the United States Supreme Court. But unfortunately, the court at that time ruled against Mr. Korematsu. And I'm just going to read to you how the court reached its ruling. All right, because I don't want to misquote anything. So in an opinion written by Justice Black, the court ruled that the evacuation order violated by Mr. Korematsu was valid. So they supported the executive order. The majority found that the executive order did not show racial prejudice, but rather responded to the strategic imperative of keeping the United States and particularly the West Coast secure from invasion. So you have two court cases where a group is being targeted and they're being targeted on the basis of keeping everyone else safe. And in one case, it was ruled unconstitutional. In the other case, it was ruled constitutional. Why did we end up having two different rulings, despite the fact that they're very similar? That's for you to figure out and think about. Second FRQ. All right. So, I'm at 22 minutes. Sorry. But I want to wrap this up. I just want to kind of get you guys to see how the Constitution plays into this pandemic that I honestly never thought I would live to see or witness. So it's crazy. Hang in there. I know you guys are seniors and you really were excited about prom, graduation, grad bash. It sucks, I know. But hopefully we can, make some adjustments. So the question about can the government police us shouldn't even be discussed, because the answer is yes. I just gave you the rundown. State and local governments can do it. Federal government can also do it. Okay? It's not a matter of what they can do, but it's really a matter of how they go about doing it. When are they going too far? And so far, I don't think they've gone too far, but only time will tell. Years from now, we're gonna have these discussions, these debates. Did they violate any group? Did they violate any person? What's gonna happen to businesses? Are businesses in a position where they can petition to the court and file lawsuits based on how state and local governments were policing, were using their policing power? It's a lot. And, stay tuned. Some other things that I thought about is, can we quarantine or adopt some of the strategies China has implemented to flatten the curve? And the answer to that is, I'm going to say no, because, China's a communist country and we're really big on democracy. But the truth is we don't even have the facilities or the capabilities to execute something to that capacity. So if you haven't noticed, no one is being forced. Everyone's being told to self-quarantine. Pay attention to the lingo. We have a curfew, but the truth is I've been out past my curfew. Ain't nobody stopping me. We have this new buzzword called social distancing. So they're really depending on us to take on the responsibility to, help flatten the curve. Now, They've only done what they're able to do in the realm of what the Constitution allows them to do. So, yes, they have the authority to tell businesses that are non-essential to shut down. Because that's the only way you guys are going to stay home. You know, they can cancel big events. They can shut down places that accommodates, you know, large crowds. Because honestly, if they don't do that, what are we going to do? Turn up! All right, guys, I'm at 25 minutes. Please practice social distancing. Check Canvas for my 2 writing prompts that I am giving you guys as a way to boost your grade and replace 2 zeros or 2, you know, I don't know. Listen, I'm at 25 minutes. I think I've given you guys everything that you need to know. And I look forward to reading your responses to my writing prompts. Stay safe, guys. Love ya.